I was 23, I had stress-related alopecia and £100,000 of personal debt. This is what happened. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Helena. I'm an entrepreneur and early stage tech investor, and in this video I'm going to share with you my story as a founder and how I got from 23 with my hair falling out and £100,000 of personal debt to now being an active UK tech investor and running 3 businesses under the Raising Partners brand whilst raising my first VC fund. Okay, let's get right into it. This video is completely unscripted and unplanned. I have no idea how long it's going to last. I'm just going to tell you the entire story from start to finish, and I'll share a couple of things I learned along the way so that if you're starting out in entrepreneurship or you're thinking about working in VC or anything at all, or you're just interested in what it's like to run a business and what it's like to run a business when you're young and some of the things that might happen and some of the pitfalls, then hopefully you'll find this story interesting. Before I get into all of the detail, the reason I wanted to share this story is because a lot of the time when you hear about entrepreneurs or people running businesses, it's just so easy to get caught up in the headlines of TechCrunch or Forbes or 30 under 30 or whatever it might be, right? You see the stuff on LinkedIn and you assume that was a really easy journey for those people of whatever business it might be to get to that point in time. And I don't think we hear enough of what happened, particularly at the beginning, or what happened when things go wrong. And my story is entirely about what went wrong. So let's go back to the beginning. I started my first business when I was 16, and I call it a business, but it wasn't really a business. It was like an eBay side hustle, right? And what I was doing was I was selling British retail brands online on eBay. So this was the early 2000s, and I guess those brands hadn't really figured out, international shipping, but they did not ship to the US and they didn't ship to the Far East. And what I was doing was I was going down my local high street. I'm from Glasgow, so if you're from Glasgow, I was walking down Buchanan Street and I was literally going into Topshop and H&M and I was buying things that were really popular, or they were selling out, or they were being worn by celebrities at the time. And I was selling them on eBay for literally double or triple the price to people in America and the Far East. And I made a pretty good teenage life out of this. I, could do everything that a teenage girl wanted to do at that time, which was buy GHD hair straighteners and go out with my friends. And I had a great time. And I made decent income and it was all wonderful. And I did this throughout university as well. So I went to the University of St Andrews. I studied for a master's in sustainable development and I graduated pretty much into the recession. So there wasn't a whole load going on in terms of graduate jobs at the time. And I thought, you know what, I've been seeing some decent success with this eBay thing. I wonder if I can turn this into an actual business. So very naively, because I was 21, 22, I was like, how hard can it be? I'll just build my own website and I'll just do what I'm doing on eBay, but I've done this degree in sustainable development and I'm interested in sustainable fashion and sustainable consumerism and brands and that kind of thing. I'll just find great brands that I love and that I know have kind of good ethical credentials, and I'll create this platform to sell them online. And there were a couple of things I didn't appreciate about going into this, and that's why I guess with probably most entrepreneurs, if you saw what would happen in the end, you wouldn't even start. But I just blindly walked into this. After I graduated, I was like, I'm not going to get a graduate job. I'm just going to do this e-commerce business. So I found some great businesses, some great brands that I really believed in, and I hacked together a website and I saw some initial early success. It was okay. I was, doing decent revenues and I had a small team and it was reasonably good. I had some initial press success. And in fact, I think some of my initial successes blew so much smoke up behind me because I was like, oh, it's not that difficult. I built this website, I'm in the press and I've got all of these people wearing these clothes and everyone's giving me all these compliments, but isn't this great? You've graduated and now you've got this successful business. And I was like, this isn't that hard. And I went to a networking dinner and I sat next to someone, and this was my first experience of raising investment. And I wasn't even looking for it. I sat next to someone, they asked me what I did, I told them, and within a week I had £100,000 of investment. And if you've ever raised money before, or if you haven't raised money before, probably more importantly, if you haven't raised money before, that is not normal. That is not how this usually goes. And I was like, great, wonderful, meet rich person, convince them that, I needed some money and I had a good business, and it was closed super quickly. So that was my first experience of raising angel investment. It was super simple. And because that was my only experience of raising money, I just thought it would be like that every single time I needed to raise investment. So a few months go by, I burned through £100,000 super quickly, and then it came to time for me to order my next order of stock, because I was selling in brands that I was buying at wholesale, and I needed to go out and I needed to do a buying trip and place some more orders, so I needed to raise money to do that. And I guess what's crucial at this point is to say that I had absolutely zero grasp of the financials. I knew what revenue was coming in to the business, and I knew roughly what was going out, but I had no grasp of how that all worked together. I wasn't really managing cash flow. I wasn't really doing detailed forecasts in a way that I wasn't assuming if I spend this much money on marketing, I will acquire this many customers, and this is how profitable a customer might be for me, or I need to have an average basket size of X and an average margin of Y. I just wasn't looking at that. I was looking in purely brutal terms, in a similar way to I was when I was on eBay, of revenue coming in, stock going out. And that was the entirety of my financial management, which I guess is like number one big painful lesson that I learned in running my first business, was having any kind of grasp on the financials. So I knew that I needed some money, because I knew in the bank I couldn't afford to place my orders. I didn't have that much cash available to me. So I went back to my investors and I was like, I need about £1 million, and I need it in like 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks would be great. And whenever I say this, people are like, you're crazy. Like, if you know anything about raising money, you will know that that is an absolutely impossible timeline. And that's not because I'm pessimistic, right? It's just because you physically can't execute a deal in that amount of time. But naive 22-year-old Helena goes off to my existing investors, and I was like, so I need about £1 million and I need it in 8 weeks. And my investors were like, absolutely not, Helena. Like, no way are we giving you this money. No. We are not that kind of investor. We're angel investors. You need proper venture funding. You need to prove this in the market. You need to prove more traction. You need to get a grip of your numbers. I need to speak to an entirely different group of investors. And I was in such shock. I just really wasn't expecting it, which now, with the benefit of hindsight, I'm like, Helena, why were you not expecting that as an answer? But anyway, I was baffled by this, because I was like, you're not going to give me this money. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I packed up my bags, and I remember this so distinctly. I packed up a suitcase of samples of my stock, and I went to London, and I literally met with any investor that would speak to me, any kind of investor. And again, now knowing what I know now about investment and how investors work, lots of investors want to talk to people because they want to have interesting conversations with interesting entrepreneurs and find out about interesting ideas. And a lot of the time, conversations with investors before they actually commit to an investment could be 6 months, up to a year of getting to know them. And I just thought I would go in, have a couple of meetings, and then they would give me money, because that was my experience from before. And I was totally unprepared for what those meetings would be like. First of all, I was meeting with the entirely wrong people. I was meeting with VC funds who were investing in B2B SaaS businesses. Now, there's some onus on them for even meeting me in the first place and kind of wasting my time, but I was just taking any meeting with anyone who would talk to me, and I was grossly underprepared. I had no financial model. I had no pitch deck. I had no real ask for them. I hadn't really thought through the overall growth of my business and where, what the exit strategy was going to be and when I would next need to raise investment and exactly how I was going to spend this £1 million I was asking someone for. And it was absolutely insane. So I spent a week traipsing around London, speaking to literally whoever would talk to me. And it became very apparent during that week that I was so far out of my depth. It was unbelievable. And that actually I was not going to magically pull off this £1 million fundraise by going around London and speaking to rich people. I was just so naive. So I looked at what was really going on in my business, and I looked at the financials, and I looked at the state that I had gotten myself in, and I was like, I've got a choice I can make now. I can keep going, I can try and raise this investment, I can try and speak to more investors, I can try and get a deck together, etc. Or I can wind this business down now with all of the learnings that I have gathered, and I can close it with my ego severely wounded, but my dignity reasonably intact. And I wasn't going to get into any serious trouble. I didn't owe anyone anything. I had enough cash to pay off the staff that I had. I had a little bit of cash to pay off the suppliers that I committed to buying things from, because I was working with small sustainable brands, often family-run businesses that relied on me for my orders, and I wanted to be as good as my word, that I would fulfill those orders that I would place, that I would pay their bill. And I took the decision to wind down my business, and it was probably one of the hardest days of my life, and I remember it so clearly, and it was so incredibly stressful. And I think one of the reasons why it was so stressful was because I had all of this smoke blown up behind me, right? I'd had all of this press and all of this PR, and I'd been going to my friends and family like, oh, isn't this great? I run a business, blah, blah, blah. And I was so deeply ashamed of what had happened. And actually, it's only recently that a lot of my friends and family even really found out what I was going through at this period in my life, because I just stopped talking to everyone. And I completely isolated myself, and I didn't tell anyone the entire picture of what was going on or exactly what I had done and how I got myself out of that situation. And I guess the icing on the cake to this was that I decided that everything that went wrong in that business was entirely my fault, and my fault alone. I made all of those decisions. I was a sole founder. I hadn't kept an eye on the numbers. I hadn't really thought of a strategic plan for long-term financing of the business. And it wasn't an excuse. It can never be an excuse that you're not good at maths or you're not an accountant to take your eye off the ball when it comes to the finances of running a business. Because I fully believe that if you're an entrepreneur and you plan to run a business, you're in the business of making money and having other people rely on you, whether that's your suppliers, your team, whomever that might be, whoever your stakeholders are, your customers, whoever, that it is you're so responsible and accountable to those individuals in a financial sense that I just think it's completely irresponsible to not have a grip of your numbers. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't have a grip on those numbers. I didn't even know what I was doing. So I chose to take out £100,000 of personal debt, which I put on a credit card. I actually put it on various credit cards and a personal loan. And I obviously knew nothing about APR because that's how I financed it. And I chose to pay back my angel investor because I had taken that money, and albeit they didn't do a huge amount of due diligence on giving me that cash, but also I couldn't live with myself if I thought you made some really stupid decisions and you lost someone 100 grand. So I can live with my own choices because I am solely responsible for those, but I couldn't turn off the light at night and know that I had basically poured someone's money down the drain because of my own naivety and stupidity. So that was, I guess, the catalyst for all of the serious stress of running my first business, and why I started to lose my hair from stress-related alopecia, because it was just horrific to be 23 years old and to have to admit that you got it wrong, that you weren't all that you had no grip of my numbers, and I now had 100 grand of debt. And what was I going to do next? It was absolutely horrendous. So what I decided to do was I took a really long time to unpick exactly what went wrong, and it was incredibly painful to rip off the plaster and to look at all of your mistakes. I think it's horrific to do, to look at decisions that you've made and to think, that was the wrong choice, that was the wrong choice, that was the wrong choice. You didn't look at this. You didn't think about the numbers. You didn't think about the growth. And in all honesty, I just felt so stupid. Like, how could I have done this? So I spent a really long time speaking to solicitors and accountants and investors, and I wasn't asking them for money or help or how to revive my business. I was just asking them, tell me what went wrong here. Like, how could this have been a better business? How could I have raised money from you? What would I do differently if I was to do this again? And I built up a pretty decent network of talking to people about what went wrong. And at the same time, I was meeting other entrepreneurs that were also running businesses and were not looking at the numbers. They weren't even they weren't thinking about how to raise investment. And because I had been through this absolutely horrific journey of my own experiences raising money and then failing to raise money, I just started talking to them and sharing my story. And it was easy because they weren't in my immediate network. That was the first time they'd met me, of chatting to them about, you know, this is what happened to me and this is what went wrong, rather than talking to my kind of friends and family about what had happened. That was my kind of therapy of talking to other entrepreneurs and kind of warning them about what I did and the mistakes I made and how they could avoid those same mistakes. And then I moved to London. I was speaking to as many people as I possibly could. I then worked in-house. I worked with someone who was raising investment, and I went through that entire journey with her of doing a fundraise, and then I went somewhere else and I did the same again, and I worked in-house specifically on a fundraise, and I ran one of the first ever rounds on Seedrs and on Crowdcube when they were early stage equity crowdfunding platforms here in the UK. And I realized that actually one of the things that had been my biggest weakness and my absolute blind spot, I was actually turning into one of my biggest strengths. And I think that's because I was so open and honest about what had happened to me, that I then had a decent network of solicitors, of investors, of entrepreneurs, of people in the early stage investment landscape that I could lean on. And when I was working with people, I would be like, oh, hey, you should meet this person because this is this investor and they're interested in e-commerce, and that's, you know, that's what you're in, and you should connect with one another, and if you're ever looking for investment, maybe this person can help. And I did that entirely for free on the side for a really long time before I realized that actually there was a market here for something. Because a bit like you go to a solicitor to get your legals done, you go to an accountant for your stuff with tax, whatever, there really didn't feel like there was anyone you could go to that could give you some really honest advice and guidance about what to do when you're raising money at an early stage. And that's when we realized that really organically we had a business here. And by this point I'd met my co-founder Duncan, and we knew that there was a gap in the market for someone that could come in and really play a hands-on role in helping people to raise early stage equity finance right across the early stage investment landscape. Because I guess two reasons. I think when you're raising money at an early stage, and if you're an entrepreneur or would-be entrepreneur, or maybe you're an investor watching this, you'll know that when you're raising money, it takes up a huge amount of your time and your bandwidth that really it can be incredibly helpful to outsource some of that stuff to someone else who can help you with things like a financial model and an investor deck, and can make good introductions for you, or can run a large scale equity crowdfunding campaign for you, because that takes up a huge amount of your time and bandwidth. And the second thing we realized is that actually there are so many easy to avoid mistakes, but if you've never raised investment before, you don't know what you don't know. You have no idea what's coming down the track. And that was certainly the case for me, where I walked into this so blindly, so naively, even though I'd raised investment before. Because I'd had this one positive experience, I just thought it would be like that all the time. And it really wasn't. And there were some super easy to avoid mistakes that I made, like not having a financial model, like not having an investment proposition, an investment narrative, like not having thought about strategically the direction that this company was going in and how I was going to convey that to investors, like not profiling the right kind of investors and spending time doing the research and the work that it takes to actually execute on one of these kind of deals. Which, when I put it like that, it sounds really simple, right? That if you're looking for £1 million, you have to put in the work. You have to do the work up front to convince someone to give you £1 million. You can't just walk out onto the street, at least definitely not the street I live on in Glasgow, and get £1 million from someone without them doing, one, making you work for it, and two, doing some due diligence, right? And I see the same mistakes happening over and over again. And when we decided to launch Raising Partners, it was to advance the entrepreneurial ecosystem by enabling people to access capital, because more than anything, I didn't want anyone else to experience what I went through. Because, as I said, you don't know what you don't know. And if you've never raised money before, unless you have got a contact or a friend or an uncle or someone in your network that can hold your hand through this experience, there's a lot of people out there running really great businesses that are falling at all these really easy, simple to avoid potholes that are, they're no fault of their own, because they just don't know what's coming down the track for them. And that's why we started Raising Partners, to fill that gap in the market and to really support people on their journey to raising early stage equity finance. So where we are now is that we have Raising Partners, which is our core client advisory business. We have Runway, which is our completely free to access content hub of everything you would possibly want to know about raising early stage equity investment. And then we have Raising Partners Angels, which is our angel syndicate of active UK investors that invest in UK tech businesses making a significant impact on people, processes, and the planet. And now what we're doing is launching our very first VC fund, which is one of the reasons why I started this channel, so that I can take you along with me behind the scenes as I run all of these businesses and raise our first VC fund. So that is the entire ugly truth about my story through entrepreneurship so far. I have to say, over the last 6 years or so, as I've been Raising Partners, it's got a lot better. It's got a lot easier. I have learned so much through this entire experience, and I have built an entire business out of what was fundamentally my biggest failure. But I thought to finish off this video, I would share a couple of things of my top highlights of things that I learned that you can maybe take from if you're running a business or you're thinking of raising investment, of my kind of top key things. Don't do this or do this, that will help you on your journey. Number one, I think, thing that went massively wrong, or that I learned, is don't be arrogant. I was so arrogant. I was so arrogant at 22. It was unbelievable. I guess as most 22-year-olds are, if you think back to yourself at that time, or maybe you are at that place right now. I just thought I knew exactly, I thought I knew it all, and I absolutely didn't. So I always say to people, like, check, and I do it to myself now, like, check what you know, do you actually know this? Is this an assumption? Are you know, what are your blind spots? What are your weaknesses here? Don't be arrogant, be super humble, take as much advice and support as you can possibly get, and just be real about what you know and what you don't know. There's absolutely no harm in getting advice and support and asking people for help if you really need it. Number two, massive takeaway for me in my first business was understanding the fundamentals of financials. And I think this is a really easy thing that I see all the time People tell themselves this story that they're not good at maths and they're not good with numbers. And I know, because I told myself this story, like that was me all over. I'm not good at Excel, I'm not an accountant, like we all know. And you're probably watching this and thinking, oh my gosh, I hate Excel, like I'm not good at numbers, I'm not an accountant. But you've got to get to know the numbers. And trust me, if I can do it, and I don't even have the equivalent of GCSE maths, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Get to know your numbers, find someone who can help you, a friend, an accountant, whoever. Read tons of stuff online, go use YouTube, you're on it right now. Learn about your numbers, understand the fundamentals of your financials and how they work, and what your weak spots are and how your cash works. Educate yourself on that. It's so empowering. I cannot tell you how good it feels once you know what's happening with the numbers in your business. So do that, absolutely do it. Number 3 is to get expert help. I do this all the time now in raising partners in the businesses that I run. I'm a massive advocate and believer in getting help from experts, of people who are better in their fields, whatever it might be than I am. Get expert help. Get the best expert help that you can afford right now. If you can't afford anything, your best expert help is Google. If you can afford some budget, get the best possible accountant or advisor or solicitor, whomever it may be. Get the best professional service and expert that you can possibly get with the budget that you have. I really underestimated how much value expert help would add to my business, and I always just viewed hiring an expert as just something that would come out of the cash and would be a drain on my resource. But actually, I think there's some things that just their benefit in the long run far outweighs their upfront cost. If you get some of these fundamental things, particularly with finances and legal, wrong at the start, it really doesn't matter how great your brand is. And it really doesn't matter how wonderful your product is, because if you don't have the cash, or you have got something's happened that's gone wrong in your legal structure, you just don't have a business. So spend the most money you can possibly afford on getting great expert help in the key areas that you need it. Number 4 is, if you are thinking of raising investment, then do your homework, do your research. In fact, I've got a whole website, which I will link down below, that is completely free for you to access on all things early stage equity investment. Go and read it all. Do your research, do your homework, give yourself the time and space and energy, and do not do what I did, which is leave yourself 6 to 8 weeks to raise £1 million. Give yourself time and space. And finally, my 5th takeaway is to be super prepared for absolutely everything that you are going to do. I don't think you can ever be over prepared. And I know that kind of feels a bit counterintuitive as an entrepreneur, because our natural instinct is to like chuck the instructions out the window and just get on with it and see what happens. But I learned the really hard way what happens if you're underprepared, if you ignore things, if you bury your head in the sand, if you don't give things the time that they deserve. And I know that's super difficult when you're trying to do a lot of different things, when you're particularly when you're trying to raise investment. But I honestly think that being over prepared for any new major project you're going into is only a good thing. And that's often where expert help comes into play, right? And my 5th takeaway is to be so over prepared for absolutely everything. And I know that absolutely flies in the face of everything that feels natural to us as entrepreneurs, particularly myself. I very much want to just chuck the instruction manual over there and kind of get on with it and learn as I go. But I would say with some things in business, particularly finances and legal, is education and being super prepared for any new thing that you're going to undertake as an entrepreneur, whether that's raising investment or hiring staff or doing a new marketing project. Knowing at least a base level of knowledge is so valuable. And that is where, free resources, Google, asking friends and family come into play. So that's my entrepreneurial story so far. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do like and consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video.